pseudo version, right? Pseudo Druidism is nothing more than Christianity and Judaism. Well, so it happened in the Far East, in India and in China. The same ancient teachings of the Tantrists was taken, plagiarized, and then totally obscured, partially transmogrified into these Eastern versions that we have today, which talk about the wheel of karma, the wheel of cycle of life and death, that if you commit sins in this life, you're going to be reincarnated and you can go up and down the scale and all of these things. And that stuff to me is very, very suspect. I don't believe in it in that way. But to talk any further about it would just take far too long. It's very elaborate. It's a good question, though. It's very interesting. And I just think that there's been too much priestly contamination of these concepts, even though I encourage people to really study it and think about it. And very, very important to do that.
Absolutely. And I have one more question that was important. I should have asked this in the beginning of the broadcast, but who was Alice Bailey? What was the Lucifer Trust Company? How did Hitler tie into Theosophy and Blavatsky? I know it's a big question, but can you maybe just put something on for the record?
Well, all I can say, you can just people can look this up on the internet. Just go to Wikipedia and type in these names and you'll learn so much from there. But certainly the tradition is that the Fabian network, which is ultimately a royalist network, because on paper it's meant to be socialist. The Bertrand Russells and the George Bernard Shaws and the Sidney Webbs and all of these Fabians like Alice Bailey and all of their little spin-offs and little offspring on paper are meant to be socialists, which often can be mistaken as being anti-royalist. But of course, if you look beneath that veil, you'll find that these people are whining and dining with royalty. So obviously they're not in any way really truly anti-royalist. It's nonsense. In fact, some of the most important Fabians went to Oxford and Cambridge universities, all right? The Fabian movement was pretty much started there. The London School of Economics, for instance, which is a Fabian headquarters, basically, has trained some of the top politicians of the world, not only the economists and so many other dignitaries. And this goes for the Round Table organizations and so many other organizations. And the royal stamp is all over them, all right? The Cecil Roses and the Lord Alfred Milners and so many of these other people are completely controlled by the Alpha Lodges of Freemasonry. And they're all royal, by the way. It's controlled by the Order of St. Michael and St. George, and is controlled by the Order of the Garter, the Club of the Isles, the Mount Perelin Society, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and so many other royalist orgs. The list goes on. And they themselves are merely bastard children of the old Templar, organizations from much earlier on, right? Then, okay, how does this tie into Hitler? On paper, you'll often read continually that Hitler and his henchmen were all influenced by Madame Blavatsky, the evil Madame Blavatsky, and the Lucifer Trust, and all of this nonsense. As we said at the beginning of the conversation, there were certain people who borrowed and plagiarized and sort of liberally borrowed symbolism and even partly ideology. The story of the root races that Blavatsky had written about as an intellectual scholar was then picked up by people. But see, you've got to realize that somebody can come along and borrow and plagiarize a teacher's work. Doesn't mean that teacher has endorsed those people. That teacher may still think of that person as a blatant plagiarizer or as a blatant misconstruer of their work.
Right.
I agree.
Madame Blavatsky was not hanging around any Nazis. Madame Blavatsky was not shaking hands
she
with
was
any of these
dead by
people.
that time, anyway.
Nor even the proto-versions. There's been no actual logical connection that she really endorsed people like Bulwer Lytton or any of these other people. Far from it. She was not in bed with any of the Jewish bankers who funded Hitler, period. She was not in with any of the Jesuits who are so much involved with fascism, both of German and Italian and other forms. My God, as I said at the beginning, she was trying to expose those people. It's a contradiction to say that then she was their best chum. And secondly, she was not a proto-Nazi any more than Nietzsche was. But then the Guido von Lists, the von Liebenfelds, and all of these proto-Nazis who are actually really called Ariosophists, and I've dealt with them in Volume 1 of the Irish Origins book to show you that they have no connection to the true meaning of the word Aryan. They are guilty of totally bending and skewing that word even worse than Madame Blavatsky did, and that they also have really no connection to Theosophy. But these evil arcs were very crafty at being able to use a lot of Masonic and Pan-Masonic stuff. With one hand, they suppress not legitimate, but they suppress German and Austrian Freemasonic lodges. Hitler's even known for doing that, and they think, oh, what a great guy to be anti-Masonic. No, 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 no. He just wanted to supplant his own form of Masonry because he knew that certain Masons are moral people and are philanthropists and won't go along with this gig, with this pretty much Zionist, socialist gig that is also very aristocratic based, you see. So he had to purge the kind of Freemasons he didn't like. It wasn't about getting rid of Freemasonry. What nonsense. It's about setting up the kind of Freemasonry they want so they won't have opposition from the other kind, right? Okay, then you find out that the Thule Society, which is aristocratic, and even its members of, I believe it's members of the Thule Society that actually mind-controlled Hitler. I believe that Adolf Hitler himself was a double agent. He worked for, not a double agent, but he worked for the British intelligence. He was their agent. More than that, I think he was mind-controlled as well, which explains a lot of his behavior and even some somnambulistic traits. Mm-hmm. And I believe it might have been Dietrich Eckhart or one of these other occultists that belonged to the Thule Society. But the Thule Society, just like the Armanenschaft and the German Order, were controlled by Masonry, very high-level Masonry. All these groups that are behind Adolf Hitler and the rise of the Nazi Party. I mean, Adolf Hitler one minute is a corporal in the army, and the next minute he turns up at the German Workers' Party with $1 million Deutschmarks in gold. $1 million Deutschmarks in gold. How is it possible? It's because he's funded by the elites. All right, he was their agent. It's a no-brainer. Then you turn to the fact of all these British connections, the connections between the British aristocrats. I mean, not only their ambassador von Ribbentrop, but Rudolf Hess was always flying back and forth to England to get the orders, right? Finally, his plane crashed, so then they had to cover it up by saying, oh, what was Hess doing flying to England? You think he only did it the one time? What are you talking about? They all have to go to England to find out what the rules are. They're being given their orders from New York City and from London. There's nothing German about the Nazis. The Nazis were there to destroy Germany, to undermine Germany forever. Because Germany represents a tremendous threat for thousands of years. There's been Germanophobia. People should study the history of Germany as it really is, not the garbage that's been taught to us. And therefore the Nazis were a order created by Masonry and British intelligence to undermine the German people in the country of Germany and to wipe them out, and also to embroil people in a blood ritual, the Anglo-Saxon Caucasian race, both of France and America and also England, to come together in a mass Holocaust for much broader reasons than I've gone into my work. It was nothing more than a huge blood ritual. And finally, some of the generals started to understand this because, of course, strategically, things were happening that were just absolutely irrational and inconceivable and insane. But it was too late. By the time people worked this out, that obviously Hitler could not be German for Germany, it was too late. The damage had already been done. How this ties into Blavatsky? Right. Well, the Ariosophists, like Guido von List and von Liebenfels and all of these proto-Nazis, pretty much insane guys, lunatic people. There's many others that I could mention in this field. I have their pictures, and I have the chapter on it in the volume 1 of the Irish Origins book. These individuals drew upon her work because it was a work of genius, and they knew that they could skew it in another way, right, and present it to the people. They needed something. They needed archive information. They wanted theories so that they could set their whole gig up. And of course, down the line, the people who are in less knowledge about what's really going on the occult level, they get fascinated by this. They misinterpret the word Aryan. Blavatsky gets the blame. You know, Germany sends off all these anthropologists and scholars around the world to take measurements and dig up old places and say, oh yeah, there was this Aryan race. And the whole thing just becomes a total hodgepodge of nonsense, all right? There's reasons for that. There's nothing to do with the purer teachings at all. But the people who actually did the funding, the people who brought these people to power, like the von Thyssen family and the Helmut Slacks of the world, you see, and the people who advised. One of the most important advisors to know about is a guy called Haushofer, Karl Haushofer.
Uh-huh. Did we lose him?
Oh my gosh. Where is he?
Huh.
That was weird.
I can't hear him. Oh, call dropped. Let's see if we can get him back on.
Yeah.